What's up, Facebook? What's up, Instagram? I'm going live right now. A little early tonight, but got a lot in store for you. Let me get my notes pulled up here. But anyways, so I'm going to break down the July 16th speech by President Donald John Trump, which was about election interference, and show you, if you're a patriot, your validation, for one. 6 years, which is a little too long, obviously, but it will be validation for you. You know, they always say my dad had a saying that the proof's in the pudding, and if he was talking to someone that was the actual problem, he'd say the proof's in the pudding and you're the pudding. So, you know, we have a situation in America where I tell people all the time, I think the better technology gets, the dumber people get. Because you have everything right in front of you, right at your fingertips, but then you don't have the what? You don't have the tools to be successful. The tools are your IQ. You know, the old saying is that knowledge is power. No, it's not. It's the application of knowledge that's power. It's not just knowledge. Now, you got to have the knowledge too, but you got to apply the knowledge. So too many Americans are looking pretty atrocious right now. Now, kudos to you. If you're from another nation, you get a hall pass because obviously you guys and gals value education. Americans don't. Americans want someone else to do it. They want people like me. Oh, you love this. You love talking about it. You do this weekly, daily, monthly. You do it. Well, we are doing it. But then it's the same people who turn around and complain about gas and costs and taxes and food and everything, you name it. They don't even have two nickels to rub together to make a penny, but they're the ones complaining the most. But they still want me to do it and you, the true patriot, to do it. So now we gotta break down another category. It's not just patriots anymore. Now there's patriots and then true patriots. And, you know, does it really matter at the end of the day as far as that goes? No, it's going to shake itself out because the real patriots are going to shake out the weeds, right? All the others out there that didn't do anything, they're going to be exposed just because they didn't do anything. But my documents that you can still go to this day, they're time stamped and they're also time dated, meaning I haven't updated them since way back in 2021 or 2022. But I put out these documents that I had written from 2017 all the way to January 2021 when I published those. Free to the public. I pay for it, right? So how is it that I already knew what was going on before the election? Because you can look at my notes as I updated them. How was it that I already knew before that ever happened? Now, there's quote-unquote podcasters out there that tell you that they've been knowing a long time, but they have no timestamp proof. It's just all right here. And then some of you believe them just because maybe they are a good person, but they have nothing. I have timestamp written proof on Google Documents, published January 2021, that I already knew what was going on lawfully, but not just lawfully. See, there's another application of law that people have forgotten. My books, the #1 bestsellers, right? These are intellectual property. Meaning, I took laws and orders, yes, but the but is the irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, strategies and tactics, layers and layers and layers and variables and variations, etc., is what I wove together to show you that 45-47 is a special and strategic operation. So you got to have all components to know that. And once there's a book out, which this was published in December 2023, even though it stems from my documents published January 2021, and then part 2 over here, once there's a book out and it outlines in a chronological order all the laws and orders, strategies, and tactics, and it outlines the whole blueprint of what President Trump has already done and the deep state's already gone, there's no excuses for you to be following all these pansy podcasters out there telling you the deep state's in panic and all that. No, they're not. They're not even around anymore. And once you have that outline, blueprint, strategy, everything, Americans have zero excuses to look as atrocious as they do right now. Especially your friends and family, patriots. You know who they are. You know them. Y'all know. The ones that looked all shocked and surprised, the Republicans, conservatives, on Thursday night. Oh my gosh. No, already in number one best-selling books. And you all made them number one because I'm an independent writer, independent editor, independent publisher, self-published. So we're going to break this down, and I'm going to show you. But I'm going to do it backwards this time around. We're going to flip it around backwards. Kind of cool, though. So what set up this operation? Here you go. Let's roll with it. So on December the 20th, 2019, Congress passed the NDAA of 2020. All right. It was a Democrat House, which means Nancy Pelosi was a speaker. So it means Democrat-controlled House is what put in Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. All right, which I'm going to break down here shortly. All right. Also on that day, Space Force was established. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, Title 10, which is military law, was overhauled for the first time since 1950 and updated, overhauled, that's what that means. All right, then also, same day, Global Fragility Act was passed. I'm going to break that down in a minute, going to read all about that. And then you had your Courts Martial Handbook, which was updated. It had to be, even though it's still separate, but it had to be because the Uniform Code of Military Justice, military law, was updated. Then you had your February 4th, 2020 State of the Union speech, where that was the first time that the American public heard President Trump mention the word COVID. All right. March 13th, 2020, President Trump declared a verbal national emergency. All right. Then March 24th, there was an article put out there that mainstream media put out that most Americans wouldn't read about because most Americans don't care about until they absolutely have to care when they're in a state of panic. But mainstream media put out that a general was to be installed just in case the law breaks down. If the law breaks down, ladies and gentlemen, on the federal side, that don't mean it breaks down on the military. If the federal law breaks down, that means military law kicks in, which is martial law. All right, so military government and all the other applications of irregular warfare and unconventional warfare. That was March 24th, 2020. March 27th, 2020, President Donald John Trump, Executive Order 13912, invoked Title 10, Section 12302, which is a federalization order of the National Guard and the reserve components. All right, right there. That didn't have an emergency inside of it. It's a regular executive order. So if it's not revoked by the next president, it is still active. Very key. Very key. All right, March the 30th, President Trump's in all these different press conferences. What is he saying to the public? Take hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, zinc, Z-Pak. He didn't say take Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and all these others. He told you, the public, to take hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, Z-Pak if your heart could take it. Where the heck were you, and what were you listening to? You weren't listening to the Commander-in-Chief. All right, so, sorry. If you took the other, and you took the alteration, and it's messing with you, and some people have kicked the bucket because of it, it's part of life. It is what it is. You have to address these things. April the 1st, that's when Southern Command launched the Operation Southern Spear, which is going on in the what? Caribbean Sea, which is pertaining to whom? Venezuela. April the 1st, 2020. April the 30th, 2020, Executive Order 13919, President Trump invoked Title 10, Section 12304, which is a 2-year preparation. All right? You might want to know some military laws out there. You might want to know military sections and how they apply and who they apply to. So, he directed the Secretary of Defense to federalize selective reserves to active duty. All right? July the 1st, he tore up NAFTA, old trade agreement. He established the USMCA, the new Canadian and Mexican trade agreement. July the 14th, Executive Order 13936, national emergency with Hong Kong. Who did he say took over the Panama Canal? Hong Kong. Why did we send 4,000 Marine Corps to Panama last year? Wonder why. And they're still down there. August 28th, this is very key. This is really fun to break down. August 28th, 2020, congressional report comes out. Up at the top says Military Justice Act. Well, that was passed way back in 2016. Now, why in the world would the old Supreme Court that had more liberal justices on it, why would they all of a sudden, out of nowhere, clarify that military law is separate from federal law? Meaning court-wise. So you take that, now fast forward back to December the 20th, 2019, when they overhauled the Uniform Code of Military Justice and they overhauled the Courts Martial Handbook. Updating courts marshaling? Pretty sure the military justice ties in with the JAG, which is who you would stand before in front of in a military court. So why was the liberal Supreme Court out of nowhere clarifying this, and then they put it in the NDAA of 2017? Who was becoming president January the 20th, 2017? Yeah, what a coincidence that is. If you take 180 business days, which is how the government operates, when they put clauses 180 days, they mean business days. When you take 180 business days added to December the 20th, 2019, it gives you August 28th, 2020. And there's a report there that the president was supposed to do. Following what? Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, put in December the 20th, 2019. See how this rolls? Okay. September the 15th, President Trump established the Abraham Accords. November the 4th, we all know what took place that day. That was the election of 2020. You had a 4-star general telling you that our joint partners all over the world were working with our National Guard and our Cyber Command and our national security, watching the elections, hoping we learn what we learned from 2018. Well, what were we learning in 2018? Wonder what happened in 2018. Oh, we're going to get there in a minute. All right, November the 12th. 8 days later, President Trump, Executive Order 13959, declares a national emergency versus the People's Republic of China. Oh my goodness. Did we just say November the 12th, 2020, and President Trump, July 16th, 2026, told the whole world, and many heard it for the quote-unquote first time, that the People's Republic of China were meddling with our elections? And way back here, there's an executive order with a national emergency just 8 days after that election that quote-unquote Joe enhanced in Executive Order 14032. But then when you look at the continuation of President Trump's order of that national emergency, which was continued last year, which would be 2025, he continued Executive Order 13959. Why would he continue in Executive Order 14032? Oh, because in November and December 2025, he told you that all executive actions by quote-unquote Joe are hereby terminated, which if that was a real-life scenario, it would create judicial world chaos, and it didn't do so. Which, again, always goes back to strategic special operation that you're watching. And if you have problems with this, you have problems with the United States military. Special operations. December the 7th, President Trump, Executive Order 13961, Federal Mission Resilient Strategy, which is a strategy for what? Continuity of government. December the 10th, Executive Order 13963, the most recent to date, July 19th, 2026, the most recent to date order of succession within the Department of then Defense, now War, is from Executive Order 13963 from December the 10th, 2020. Every single president has had an order of succession within the Department of Defense, now War, except for, quote-unquote, Joe. December the 14th, that's when the states were supposed to have their vote counts turned in for the presidential electors. The same day that President Trump, who's never lived in the great state of Texas, of which I've lived in a long time, files via the state of Texas through the United States Supreme Court a court case versus the 7 swing states of 2020. If you go to your new form of AI, which is good if you use it the correct way, can teach you all kinds of things about laws in all kinds of ways, professional and personal. All right. If you go over there and check it out, it'll tell you that it is statistically impossible that the election of one year will be the same swing states of the next election. But the first time in United States election history, the swing states of 2020 were the same swing states of 2024. And President Trump, quote unquote, lost those in 2020, but won all 7 in 2024. But there's this random Supreme Court case right here in the middle of that no one's heard about yet, except through me. Weird. What a coincidence that is. January the 1st, it was told, and then it was published on January the 15th. In my book, you'll see both dates, but January the 15th, it was published by FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. Who did President Trump talk about the other night? FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. They published a publication called Reconstitution of the Executive Branch. Ladies and gentlemen, there's never, ever, ever, I sound like a Taylor Swift song. Don't know if that's good or bad, but personally, I'd rather hear a cat scream than I would listen to Taylor Swift. But never, ever, ever, ever has there been a publication from FEMA or the Department of Homeland Security for Reconstitution. And all of a sudden, right before all these great events that you witness, there's a publication by FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security after all these events that we're talking about. Do you know what Reconstitution means? It means to take something from its state it's in right now and put it back into its original. Ooh, what a coincidence. January the 6th. No wonder why the public was showing what they were showing with January the 6th. Because the quote-unquote deep state had no longer any hold. Right? All right, so they had to create some stuff out there to distract people. Also, January the 6th, Nancy Pelosi, all of you lame brain marbleheads out there, sorry, I'm not going to call you stupid anymore. I'm just going to call you a marblehead, all right, because you got a thick skull, and it's up to you to loosen it up and put some knowledge in there. But Nancy Pelosi, no Speaker of the House, no congressperson ever, there's Taylor Swift again, never, ever, would ever have any say-so in the National Guard, ladies and gentlemen. I don't care what President Trump said. That was distraction. Once you know the plan and you know the applications of law, you would know that he's doing that for other reasons. He's saying this for other reasons. Nancy Pelosi would have never had any say-so on the National Guard, especially of D.C. The D.C. National Guard are directly under the president. You might want to know the applications of military. We have our own laws and orders. We have to abide by both. So, January the 6th, January the 7th, January the 11th, January the 17th, National Guard started rolling into D.C. The first time in United States history, all 50 states plus Guam and Puerto Rico National Guard were in one location for one time. For an old white man getting inaugurated? Come on, ladies. How many old white men have you seen inaugurated in history? I mean, it's not rocket science. The whole world, we witnessed whatever you want to call him, but for the sake of the first colored person in history get elected. What did people do on Monday back in 2008? What did people do? They just went to work, didn't they? Did you see white supremacists and hillbillies and rednecks and Morgan Wallen fans storming the Capitol? No, you didn't, did you? You sure didn't. You didn't see no Dollar General specials up there. You didn't see no Dollar Tree specials up there. You didn't see no Family Dollar specials up there. Everybody just went to work. So what would be so great that you needed 50 states, Guam, and Puerto Rico on your taxpayer dollar flying all the way for some old white man if that were a real scenario? You have to apply it this way. January the 18th, President Trump, 2021. Executive Order 13977. He put out a protection order for judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, and their families. An executive order for a protection order for all judges, prosecutors, law enforcement, and their families? What was coming? Patriots, you know. January the 20th. It is what it is. Quote unquote Joe raised his right hand at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is a violation of the 20th Amendment. If you watch the new Melania documentary, they'll tell you the sequence of what presidents go through and why 12 o'clock and 12:01 and 12:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time are very, very important. Every other president's followed this except for what you saw that day. When quote-unquote Joe raised his right hand as soon as the oath was administered, dum-ba-da-dum-bum-bum, you're supposed to hear that. 4 of those. After the 4th one, when Hail to the Chief starts, the 21-gun salute is supposed to start. You did not see that day. They didn't show a 21-gun salute. For the first time in the United States election history, inauguration history, they showed 2 different sets of cannons on the same day. They've never shown the cannons at Arlington because they didn't want to get any kind of confusion with the people out there for an actual funeral service at Arlington, and also a real 21-gun salute for inauguration celebrations, and also 21-gun salutes for actual funeral services for when presidents are told that they die. And that's where everybody gets so confused there, because you don't listen. And it wasn't a disgrace. It wasn't a mockery. They're not doing that against the military. The military is in control. The military had say-so. Hey, here's what we can do. We can show people optics. And little old me, little old Army veteran me, saw it and goes, that's not a 21-gun salute. By definition, that's a funeral honors. So the whole world witnessed, quote-unquote Joe, have a funeral honors. The National Guard turned their back on the motorcade. Everyone in the military, we always salute the Commander-in-Chief, and we always salute a moving flag. And to be honest, we love our commander, but we'd rather salute a moving flag before we salute a president. All right, just because the flag holds more significance in another way, because the flag is always there, the presidents are always changing. Keep that in mind. All right, the National Guard stayed in D.C. They didn't leave. The mainstream media told you back then they were staying till March. They never left. That's why libtards out there, the few that are left out there, ain't many, but the few that are left, they're out there, oh, the National Guard are still in D.C. What are we doing funding this? They never left. They've been there this whole time. Which, again, proves the point. All throughout 2021 to 2025, there were 3 things that were consistent around quote-unquote Joe. Only 3 that were consistent but showed you in operation. The insignia that you saw on President Trump's headband that were behind him on January the 20th, 2017. That was President Trump's showing. When all the military walked down behind him January the 20th, 2017. The headbands, like this hat right here, has a headband. All right. Military intelligence, Judge Advocate General. Who gathers intelligence in the military? Military intel. Who puts it in a court? JAG. All right. The other one, it sounds like 2, but it's only 1. Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations. You mean the actual handbook from the United States Army that I was in? You mean, you're going to tell me that civil affairs and military operations, which include psychological operations, is the insignia they showed you around quote-unquote Joe the whole time? And this is supposed to be some kind of quote-unquote coincidence? I don't think so. So that's the only thing that was consistent. The other times they had old Vice President, old Kamala, they had her saluting a regular pilot. What is a regular pilot doing standing beside an Air Force guy in a regular suit with an Air Force pilot in his suit, and the pilot sitting there saluting too? People, get your heads out of your you-know-whats. All right? Wreath laying salutes. If you'll go back and watch, I've shown it on all my podcasts. I've shown the clips if you'll go watch. And our very sacred unknown soldier grave. This is why they're showing you it really is an operation, because it would be a mockery. It would have been a mockery, though, on quote-unquote Joe if this was all real time. So you got to go watch. In the wreath laying ceremonies, when you watch quote-unquote Joe and quote-unquote Kamala and quote-unquote Lloyd Austin, go back, especially him of all people, if you thought he was real, military, go back and watch. Watch this. Present arms. Order arms. You got old quote-unquote Joe, Kamala, and all of them going, present arms. Order arms. It don't work like that. Go watch President Trump. Go watch J.D. Vance. Go watch present arms. Order arms. It's details that matter. And those of you out there that are not military, that's why it matters even more. Because when you try to say any of this is hogwash or bullcrap, especially your family and friends out there, you're the bullcrap. Because you want us and you expect us to go by the laws and the orders. But when we teach you these things, especially customs and traditions, and you want to call it bullcrap, no, you're the bullcrap. June 19th, 2021. I'm going to read it for you. Executive document. So, it says, I hereby delegate to the Secretary of Defense the authority and functions vested in the President of Section 1550 on the use of military force and support of partner forces to the Congress. Why would quote-unquote Joe be relinquishing his power and authority as a Commander-in-Chief and President to the Secretary of Defense? That's what this is saying, and it's in Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550, that was passed December the 20th, 2019, under whom President Trump, all right, roll down to the bottom, executive documents. It says, by the authority vested in me as president. Don't say the president. And then it turns around, this is why terminology matters. It says that I hereby delegate the Secretary of Defense the authority and functions vested in the president of 1550. Well, who was the president of 1550? That would be President Donald John Trump. So what is quote-unquote Joe doing relinquishing all authority and functions over to President Trump? Well, the order of succession was still with President Trump, because this would be June 19th. Is it June or July? Let's see here. July 19th, 2021. Why would quote-unquote Joe be relinquishing his authority to President Trump? Because the laws and the orders already outlined we were already in a military occupation and a military special operation. See, this is why laws and orders matter from the military. President Trump had already done that with the Secretary of Defense. April the 30th, 2019. He already delegated. And then in Executive Order 13963, the order of succession. If you utilize your new technology, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to AI and you put the prompt in correctly, guess what it'll show? So what would happen in a real life scenario if a president doesn't have an order of succession? It'll also tell you chaos. Because if there was something that happened during that time period, it falls back on what? The most previous one. But every other president has had an order of succession except for quote-unquote Joe. So if you'll learn the language and put it all in a chronological order, it'll make sense to you, because verbiage matters. Terminology matters. All right? Now, from 21 to 2025, this is very key, especially you veterans out there. Very key. Y'all got to step your game up because you've been slacking. All right? From 21 to 25, the National Guard were still at the border in Texas, deploying rapidly from multiple states, and also the 2018-2020 elections were continued in 22 and 24, 27 plus states. When President Trump was speaking the other night, he was talking about the states. He said 18 states. Well, we had in every election, 27 plus states deployed their National Guard cybersecurity teams. Do you know what the cybersecurity teams do, ladies and gentlemen? Exactly. They track live, analog, not digital, votes. This is not difficult. So when you apply the National Guard were still deploying rapidly from multiple states to the border from 21 to 25, and also the National Guard were active in 27 plus states in the 2022 and 2024 elections. Now watch this. The authorization to use military forces that quote unquote George W. Bush, but the real George W. Bush, not the one of today, but the real one, when they passed that AUMF in 2001, it only applies to foreign affairs, foreign federalization, foreign. It don't apply to National Guard. Now, check this. From 21 to 25, quote unquote, Joe does not have one single Title 10, Title 14, or Title 32 order or funding. So how would the National Guard operate in states all over the border, elections, and also New York subways? I don't do the Trump dance too well. I look like a praying mantis in a fire ant bed, but I tried. Yeah. From 21 to 25, not a single tariff was terminated. Their presidential authority, the Trade Acts of 62 and 74, not one single tariff was terminated. Not one single Obama, Bush, or Clinton appointed judge terminated or blocked a tariff from 2021 to 2025. Not one single Obama, Clinton, or Bush judge tried to block a tariff from that time period. But they're all of a sudden a burden to the American people in 25 and 26. Do you know what kind of hypocrites you are? Do you know what kind of marblehead you are to believe that? Because in reality, if this was all real, then quote unquote Joe and quote unquote Kamala and quote unquote all of them, DNC, and President Trump are on the same page. And we know that's not the case. The laws and the orders show that. The actions show that. The enforcements of these orders show that. So you got to be a special kind of double down marblehead to believe that. National emergencies. See, in 1973, Congress made it to where a president had to declare a national emergency to utilize the military. And doing so, when one national emergency was declared, guess what it did? It unlocked 120 statute powers, regulating commerce, restricting telecommunications. We don't even have to list the other 118. We can just use those two right there to prove everything. Tariffs would be regulating commerce, and then restricting telecommunications would be what President Trump's been doing to the mainstream media. Voila! All right? All media, all the military, all the media, though, in the mainstream media, all of every article, every TV broadcast that you see flashing over here, which I'm going to turn off because it's creating a flash and a buzz, but every single broadcast, every single article is controlled. And they're all using, for the first time in history, not before President Trump, only until President Trump came on the scene, guess what the media is using? Law of War Manual terms. Why would the mainstream media be using Law of War Manual terms? When 99% of Americans didn't even know the Law of War Manual existed until I came along. So why are the media using capitulation? It was used today. Capitulation. Phew. Headline. White flag of surrender. White flag of truce. Occupied country. Occupied territory. Puppet government. Puppet state. Why are they using Law of War Manual terms? Restoration. Restoration explicitly applies to a military government. Restoration. Why are they using these terms? All right. Now, let's go to the July 16th breakdown again. So now you got that. So I did it in reverse. Now watch this. We're going to tie in what was before President Trump and watch how it ties in. In 2004, there's an article about the Department of Defense funding Ukraine biolabs. The ones that the mainstream media told you in 2021 were conspiracy theories. Well, they were under what? Control. They're to distract the mainstream public on purpose because the mainstream public don't realize they're watching a special strategic operation. All right, 2008 to 2012, Vladimir Putin was not the president of Russia. Very key. In 2010, President Trump called it one of the greatest stories that the media would not cover. Uranium One, involving Bill and Hillary Rodham Clinton, in which there was a $145 million transaction. All right. Well, guess when Hillary and Putin's pictures were taken together? The ones where you see Hillary and Putin kind of grinning. Remember that one? March 19th, 2010. The same year that the Uranium One happened. Now, what typical Republicans and conservatives would do would run wild with Putin. No. Hold on. Don't run wild with Putin. Oh, no. Hang tight. Because Bill Clinton, old Slit Willie, old intern specialist, yeah, that dude, old Slit Willie met with Putin in 2000. So Putin had some dirt. He knew everything. So when you actually learn what a strategy would be and a tactic and a negotiation, what they call a white flag of surrender or a capitulation, you might want to listen a little further. So watch this. Now, let's move forward. On March 26, 2012, is when Obama leaned over to the Russian president who was outgoing. Putin was about to come in. Hang tight. In May of so that was March 26, 2012. In May 2012, Putin will be coming back in. That's the same meeting when Obama leaned over and told that Russian president then, Dimitrov, he said, hey, in a few days I'll have a few more flexibility after my election. I'll have a little bit more. Well, he meant November. Well, what did Dimitrov tell him? He said, I'll tell Putin, I'll pass the message to him. Because this was March. Putin came back May. Obama wouldn't be elected until November, but he wouldn't actually be president again in the new term until January of that. You got to do your math here. See? Math always works. February 2014 is when the war started in Ukraine and Russia. The mainstream media tell you February of 2022. Excuse me. That ain't when they say large scale operation. No, there was a small scale operation that started in February of 2014. See, that's how they treat something so simple as how they treat the American people. And you have to say this, patriots, you know it. Exclude yourself if you're a patriot, right? But for all the others that ain't, it's okay to be called dumb because if you're dumb, you can be educated. All right? But you are dumb one soul or one dumb soul or dumb or triple dumb, doubling down on dumb or anything. If you want to sit here and not understand how simple that is. That is how easy it is to trick an American. Oh, the war started over here. No, it didn't. Small scale operation started back here. Large scale happened here. It went from a small scale to a large scale. It didn't start or begin in 2022. It started and began in 2014. Now, it'd be different had they did an all-out invasion, large scale, out the gate, and there wasn't any evidence of a small scale before. But there is evidence. And it's a key year that all these things happen that's going to tie in what President Trump and Putin and Zelensky, even though a lot of them are actors, not President Trump, but it'll tie it in for you, even more so. So the war started February 2014. Also in February 2014, Victoria Nuland, who was working for the Obama administration and VP Biden then, who was later shown as the undersecretary for quote-unquote Joe in 21 and 25, Victoria Nuland in February 2014 was saying F-U-C-K, the European Union. That's not who she'd want to be cussing, and she later apologized for it. That was February 2014. March 2014. Obama had 3 executive orders with Ukraine, 1 national emergency, and 1 of those declared. 3 executive orders alone with Ukraine in March 2014 and followed up with another one in December of 2014 for a total of 4 executive orders with Ukraine. See, that's how they confused the American people, the very few that were reading. They made you think there was something going on in Ukraine that was something the U.S. was going to have to deal with. No, that's how they were making their deals. They were using that as a facade, making you, the American people, think there was something bad going on and they were No, that's how they were making their deals. When you really read and comprehend what they were doing, they were using smoke and mirrors. All right. April and May of 2014. Victoria Nuland, the same Victoria Nuland, secured the $1 billion for quote-unquote defense for Ukraine. All right. May 2014, snap election. A snap election is when they call a quick election. That's what Ukraine did in May of 2014. They called a snap election. They had 1 round of 2. They never had the full 2 rounds. Boom, quick election. Obama called on May 27, 2014, and congratulated Poroshenko. May 26, 2015, Obama terminated Executive Order 13617 with Russia. Guess what that executive order was about? Sanctions on uranium. Now what is he doing terminating an executive order with Russia to do with uranium? Well, Putin had just figured out that they had played him for a fool. They were, quote-unquote, using their, quote-unquote, diplomacy back then, and they tricked him. And they started putting all their assets into Ukraine, which they'd been doing, but they amped it up even more because Putin wouldn't work with them. He wouldn't be controlled, but Poroshenko would. When you apply it all, more's coming here. January 23rd, 2018, Biden called the prosecutor an SOB, a son of a you-know-what. They fired the SOB over the $1 billion that Victoria Nuland had secured for Ukraine. That's the tie-in. That $1 billion is the same $1 billion. And Joe put it on record. July 16th, 2018. What a coincidence that is. July 16th, President Trump's having a speech about election interference that all ties in. And July 16th, 2018, President Trump meets with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, Finland, set up by Major General Paul Vallely that I've been on podcast with. Yeah, he set that meeting up. Vladimir Putin handed President Trump a soccer ball. That was a capitulation. The ball is in your court. Now, what are the odds when you fast forward in 2022? What are the odds that Russia didn't play in the World Cup, which you just saw the finale today if you were watching? All right, what are the odds that Russia did not play in the World Cup? Soccer ball, sacrifice, capitulation, and then they go into Ukraine. See, we have joint operations going in Ukraine, and if you listen to special operators, we have special operations in Ukraine. They're decimating these nuclear, biological, chemical facilities. And it's the same thing President Trump did with Mexico, where he used 28,000 Mexican soldiers for the border wall. Same thing. You're using Russia to go in there and decimate all these things that the old deep state had funded. All right? And Ukraine's a part of it too. It's all a joint operation. So, do you go ahead and just tell the people what's going on? No, you don't do that. You know why? Because that isn't the only thing going on. So you get the dirty work done, and then you get all the dirty work done all over the world, and then you turn around and educate the people who are living. This is what took place. Because if you die, guess what? You're going to find out anyway, right? So if you die, you don't matter anyway. You're going to find out wherever you're going, up or down. I don't know about down. If you go down, I don't know how that works for you. You might just be extra thirsty, wanting water and wanting the truth and knowing the truth. We don't know. But I plan on ascending, not descending. I don't know about you, but that's what I plan on doing. So it's really all strategic, again, where you don't tell the people initially because you want to get out as many as you can all the way from the top to the bottom. July 16th, soccer ball. September the 12th, 2018, President Trump, Executive Order 13848 with a national emergency for election interference. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? Then, September the 17th, 5 days later, Ukraine breaks a Commonwealth treaty with Russia. Wow, that's a big deal. October the 20th, 2018, President Trump declares that we're leaving the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of it, and that way you'll hear. The U.S. declared its intention to withdraw from the treaty on October the 20th, 2018. This prompted Putin to state that Russia would not launch first in a nuclear conflict, but would annihilate any adversary, essentially restating the policy of mutually assured destruction. Now, what mutually assured destruction means, it's a doctrine, let me get my scroller here, of military strategy and national security policy which posits that a full scale of nuclear weapons by an attacker on a nuclear armed defender with second strike capabilities would result in a complete annihilation of both the attacker and the defender. But it creates a Nash equilibrium, which is where no player could gain more by changing their own strategy in a game. So meaning, if you have capabilities, but you make this pact, right, that, well, we won't strike first, but we will annihilate you if you do. Most of the time, it's kind of like when you see a little dog and a big dog, and they got something in between them, and the little dog's just barking away, but then you remove that from them. What does the little dog do? He shuts up, right? He don't bark anymore. Real simple. All right, so when you go read these strategies, it's an all-out strategy of that. President Trump announces that. We officially left it in February of 2019. So then in February 2019, February the 20th, 2019, President Trump issued Title 10 order to the border with a proclamation 9844. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a president doesn't have to tell you verbally that we've entered martial law in that kind of manner, but there's a proclamation that'll be there. If you'll notice that the southern border deployment of the National Guard was not in executive order form, it was in a proclamation. There's your proclamation right there that President Trump's telling you we're going into a martial law. Because it's in a proclamation form. It's not in executive order form. But in that proclamation 9844, there's a Title 10 order. That's a federalization order. It's not just a regular. It's not a state funding with Title 32. It's a federalization. And then you'll read that in this book right here. I always hold this up for everybody to get. All right. Check this book out. This is what all military law stems on. William Berkheimer, right here. Military, government, and martial law. I don't make money on this book, so you can find it on Amazon and everywhere else. But you can also get it on PDF form out there. There's an actual .org site that has a full PDF that you can also Control F and search words on it. But this right here, William Berkheimer, very beneficial for you. All right, it'll tell you what in a military government, all about a military government. And yes, it'll tell you also, for temporary purposes, supported by the Constitution, Article 2, the president can most certainly declare war without the Congress. It depends on what card he's holding, what hand he's holding. Right here. Stop arguing with the military. If you want us and appreciate us, stop arguing with us. December the 20th, 2019, we're back to that again. So, December the 20th, 2019, Space Force was established again. Global Fragility Act. All right, let's read the Global Fragility Act. It's a bipartisan U.S. legislative initiative designed to transform how the United States prevents and responds to violent conflict. It shifts U.S. foreign policy from a reactive containment model toward a proactive 10-year strategic approach aimed at addressing the root causes of instability. What have you heard in all of President Trump's speeches? A whole of government, 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 whole of government. But a whole of government is like the umbrella, the whole umbrella, and every other form is under that. So if you need a military government, continuity government, puppet government, you got to go study these things. Because they're telling you right here in the Global Fragility Act that was bipartisan passed on December the 20th, 2019. And you hear it in all of President Trump's speeches. You hear it in J.D. Vance's speeches. Whole of government, whole of government. Marco Rubio, whole of government, whole of government. Then your courts martial, your Title 10 overhauls, and then also your Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. All on December the 20th, 2019. Now you add this timeline back to the 2014 and move it forward. So I did the 2020, 2019, December 20, 2019, throughout 2020, and then 21 to 25. Now go back and add backwards. In this video, when you watch it again, go back and add it up. You do it backwards, you do it forwards, doesn't matter. It all adds up. Of why President Trump would invoke a continuity government. Why he would invoke it. And his orders are there December the 7th. And then the publication from FEMA and Department of Homeland Security on January the 1st and 15th. The first time ever there's a publication for reconstitution. They're telling you what was coming. And that's why all the quote-unquote Joe was a puppet government. It was fake. None of it was real. And then it's called a puppet government. So the puppet government's out here facing the public civil affairs, and the military government's back here doing all the real work. Which is also, again, why you didn't see tariffs. They weren't terminated. It's why you saw PBS and NPR getting hammered in 2024. How come, quote-unquote, Joe and the Democrats couldn't save their own libtard organizations? I mean, it's pretty simple. It's not difficult at all. All right, now go back to this. Go back to January the 17th, 2017. There was a Federal Continuity Directive 1 put out. It was reissued. Federal Continuity Directive 1, 3 days before President Trump took his famous oath for the first time. And then also joint planning was put out, and also joint operations. So you got a Federal Continuity Directive 1, January the 17th. June the 13th, you have Federal Continuity Directive 2, which is the implementation portion of 1. And you had a joint planning and a joint operation 3.0 and 5.0, which is the military portion. Joint, meaning military joins with federal, of what would operate a what? Continuity of government. Guess who put them out? FEMA and Department of Homeland Security. So those are your umbrellas of your continuity government. And then you have on January the 1st, published January the 15th, a reconstitution of the executive branch. Never before in history, a publication addressing what we're about to do to the executive branch. And we're about to witness a puppet government, which we've done before in history, not at this capacity, and a continuity government. And that's what the whole visual was, kicking off with a quote-unquote fake inauguration on January the 20th. This is not rocket science. It's not difficult. It's just new, and people never knew it existed, is the thing. And when you have something new like this that people never heard of, then they want to call it all kinds of things. Well, you're a marblehead. Sorry. You can change being a marblehead, but only you can do that. So you have those publications put out by FEMA and Department of Homeland Security. You got President Trump on July 16, 2026 talking about FEMA and Department of Homeland Security. And what they had done what? Operationally, what they had discovered. The burn bags and all these other things. Well, you got to go back to Coast Guard. Now you got to bring in the Coasties. The Puddle Pirates, you guys get a special shout out. Go back to Executive Order 13912 on March 27, 2020. There were 4 Title 14 orders put in that as well. That's your puddle pirates. That's your Coast Guard. That's your coasties. They were even called out of retirement. One of those was a retirement order. Man, that's when you know it's really special. When you get to come off your couch after getting fat and happy, when the military tells you if you got a reserve clause still on your contract, don't get fat and happy. Well, if someone had done got fat and happy, they were having to go back to duty. All right? So, see, you got to know these things. As so many Americans have no idea that all these different orders exist in the military. Well, who does the Coast Guard operate under? The Department of Homeland Security. Unless what? Wartime. Then they transfer to whom? Department of War with the Department of the Navy. And that's why Mobile, Alabama, my birthplace, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and Miami, Florida, they've had striker units deployed there for quite a while. Out of San Diego, they have Coast Guard and naval units connected to each other, and all those striker units from the Navy are on Coast Guard bases in Mobile, Alabama, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and Miami, Florida. So when you take the Federal Continuity Directives 1 and 2 and the joint planning and joint operations of the military, which ties in your federal and your military operations, then you take your Executive Order 13961, the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy, and Executive Order 13963, which is the most recent 2-day order of succession with the Department of War. All right, 3 days apart, December the 7th and 10th, 2020. You take your Law of War Manual terms. You take the fact that quote-unquote Joe, they show you that quote-unquote Joe has a 2022 National Security Strategy, but how come it's not posted on the Department of Defense Strategies history page? It's not on there. So why isn't it posted there? Why is President Trump's the most recent National Security Strategy posted? I know why. I know why. I know why. How come quote-unquote Joe and quote-unquote the Ho and quote-unquote the DNC and quote-unquote Obama, see all the Republicans? Oh boy, if I heard this one time, I heard it a million. Republicans throughout 21 and 25 was saying, Obama's back here pulling the strings. It's not really Joe or Kamala. It's Obama back. Okay, how come Obama couldn't terminate Executive Order 13823? If you go back and painfully watch the babbling, stammering Stan, quote-unquote Joe's campaign of 2020, he campaigned majority of 2020 that he was going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Well, if you go back to President Trump's campaign in February 2016, he was out on the campaign trail, and Obama was somewhere, and Obama had said, we're going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Same day, President Trump in speech said, I heard someone today say we're going to shut down Guantanamo Bay. No, we're not. We're going to keep it open. And on January the 30th, 2018, President Trump revoked a portion of Obama's executive order that was going to shut it down, get it rolling, where Congress could have it by executive order and say, all right, old Obama got it started, we're going to shut it down. President Trump sliced it, and he issued Executive Order 13823 to keep it open. How come, quote-unquote, Joe couldn't revoke that? If Joe was president, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many times I got to say this, but I don't know what else I could do. I mean, this is so simple. This is just functions of a president. If Joe was real and if Joe was president, Joe would have had the same authority and power as every other president. But he could not revoke a single order by President Trump that applies to the military, that applies to all the deployments, that applies to all the election interference, FEMA, Coast Guards, Department of Homeland Security, National Guard, everything, nothing. 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies. This is not difficult, ladies and gentlemen. This is why it looks so atrocious to see people still out there following all these podcasters saying the deep state is in panic and all this other stuff. No, they're not. They're not even there. They're not. If you knew what you're supposed to know about President Donald John Trump, his laws, his orders, his enforcements, his actions, and the visuals of those, you'd probably be laying on a nude beach in California looking like a starfish. You'd be so relaxed right now. You'd be so happy right now. You'd be sipping on everything that you like to sip on and then some. You'd be so cool, calm, collect right now. You wouldn't look like some of these people out there. You'd just be chilling. You'd be like, gosh, these normies. That's what you look like. Just like this. So, another thing that ties in, and I want to address this with this because it ties in, because I keep seeing people out there get looking like a marblehead. And you shouldn't. If you knew the whole picture, the 40,000 foot view, the chronological order, and apply all of them, if you knew all of it, you wouldn't be struggling. Palantir. Let's go over Palantir again. This all ties in. If you go to a Yahoo Finance article, all right, they're talking about Palantir. This ties into data centers because we use data centers, and you see all these quote-unquote patriots and quote-unquote Republicans and quote-unquote conservatives all of a sudden whining and complaining about data centers. Ladies and gentlemen and marbleheads, data centers have been around since the 1940s, all right? And they have these different years and timelines of what they've increased because we have AI, we have technology, we have the internet, we have all these things like Facebook where you post your half-naked pictures for the world to see. Instagram where you're over there looking like a hooker. All right. All these things that people are doing. They got to house all this data somehow, some way. So either you want it or you don't, which includes your personal life as well and all your half-naked pictures that your daughters and all these other people are out there doing all over social media. Either you want that or you don't. Okay, let's terminate it. But if we terminate it, then we get rid of social media. I'm down for that. I'm cool for that. Every one of us that's over 40 years old, we lived in a time before internet, with the internet meaning social media apps and all these other things. We're cool with that. But if you're going to whine and complain and you want to keep your apps on your phones and you're housing all these photos and all this data and all these things, all the posts you're doing, and when you think of things like Rumble, you think of Facebook. That's why Facebook don't keep the videos anymore. That's why I take these and put them on Rumble, because they don't keep them as long anymore because they're not housing that data. YouTube, they don't even know. The people of YouTube say they don't even know how many videos they have because people are uploading so many a day. Well, guess what someone has to do? The people of YouTube have to house that data, which means they're paying for it. You're not. That's why they made subscriptions for you to be able to follow things on YouTube without commercials. And they found a way to monetize it. That way they can pay for all this data. So if you're going to have the internet and you want to benefit from the internet, you might want to stop your whining and complaining and comprehend how this stuff works. Because most of you out there whining, complaining, and griping and groaning, but you're still utilizing it, you look dumb. That makes you a hypocrite. It's a contradiction. So Palantir is what President Trump, it started in 2011, yes, but President Trump took it over because he inherited that. It was a part of a contract that Palantir had already made with the United States military. So he inherited that. Well, just because he inherits something doesn't mean it's going to stay the same, you marblehead fools. He changed it. He's changed up leadership. Come on, people. Use these. It's what they're there for. So he inherits it. He changes it. Palantir article on finance. 4 words. 4 words sums up the whole article. This is what I'm teaching you here for. This is what I'm here for, to show you the words. You don't even have to read every article most of the time. You can just find the key words. It's what lawyers do. All right? Key words. 4 words in this article. Compiling data. Existing contracts. The people who are complaining the most about Palantir, guess what y'all say? Oh, we don't want them to have our information. They already had your information. Compiling data means they already had it. If they're compiling something, it means they already had it. So if you were already compromised, you were already compromised. Just like President Trump told you, 220 plus million people in the election, that China has all your information. So you either trust President Trump and the military, us, special operations of the military, which is still President Trump and his military. You've seen all the cleanouts of all these commanders. There's been 330 plus commanders relieved of duty since 2017. That's a record, ladies and gentlemen. It's a clean out. And it's what you're not cleaning out of your head and putting back in your head is the problem. You're not paying attention to what the president's doing. That is so biblical, historical, monumental. And it's a 40,000 foot view. There's so many things taking place. But this ties into your communication systems. The Space Force, when the Space Force was established, December the 20th, 2019, following that, the Army and the Navy transferred all their communications out of the Army and the Navy to the Space Force. The Army transferred all their ground missile warning systems to the Space Force. So every bit of the systems are now communication systems, telecommunication systems are with the Space Force. That's why Elon is such a big deal. All throughout 2020, Elon was launching all these satellites with the Space Force. So this is why liberals look even more marble-headed, because they're sitting there whining, complaining about Elon, and he's sitting there protecting the whole world with his systems and the Space Force and all these systems that are collecting data the correct way. So you got to trust someone at the end of the day. And how you trust them is educating yourself with the things that matter. You are the government. We are the government. These representatives represent us. But it's a mutual reciprocality. They're supposed to be doing what they're doing because you don't want to be a House representative. You don't want to be a senator. You don't want to be a president. You don't want to be, most of you don't, right? So it's a reciprocality. If you're knowing and studying and learning and knowing what you're supposed to be doing and they're doing it, it'll be reciprocal. They won't be pulling anything over you because when you're empowered and you know what you're supposed to know, then you'll be able to pick out the ones that ain't doing what they're supposed to be doing. The other thing is they will be sitting in a glass box from here out. What President Trump has done to the offices, plural, out there, he's made it to where they're going to be sitting in a glass box. Meaning they're going to be there for the right reasons and they're going to be able to field questions for the right reasons, and they should field questions and give you the correct responses. But you won't know the correct response if you don't know the correct knowledge. Should I keep preaching? Do you want to listen to that line again? You won't know the correct response if you don't know the correct knowledge. And the correct knowledge is not drama. It's not propaganda. It's not all these other things out there. Because most of these podcasters, they're just new faces and new names, claim to be independent, claim to be all these things. And all they're doing is regurgitating opinions. They're not giving you sources. They're not writing books with laws and orders. They're not writing strategies. They're not strategists like me. They're not strategists or anything of that nature, right? They're not doing this. This is top of my head, right? I took the laws and orders, but then I show you all the strategies and tactics of irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, asymmetrical warfare, all the different forms of warfare, right? I wrote that off the top of my head. These people are not doing that. And it's what leads to confusion. But most of you are Christians. What does the Bible say? It says that God's not the author of confusion. So why are you listening to people who confuse you? You shouldn't be. You should be listening to people who empower you. And the people out there spreading false information about President Trump and Dan Scavino and Don Jr., Eric, me, all the ones out there saying we're all these different things and we're pawns and we're this and we're that. It's because they're marbleheads and they don't even know the laws and the orders. They're too dumb to break down the laws and orders. So what do they got to do? They got to spread all this false stuff because they're too dumb to do anything else. And you shouldn't be listening to those people. We're in a military operation. Therefore, you need military personnel and or federal personnel that knows what's going on. That are free to talk. I'm free to talk. Right? So Palantir compiling data from existing contracts. It's real simple. And then your Army, Navy transfers all communications to the Space Force. Now watch how it ties in. Executive Order 13959 from November the 12th, 2020, the one that hammered the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist military, it had sanctions in there sanctioning U.S. security companies like, stocks, bonds, anything of that nature, for funding the Chinese Communist military, the People's Republic of China. So if you go read that executive order, it was signed November the 12th, 2020. I got the 2012 mixed up with my head, but the 2020, all right, the good year that everybody was confused with all the face diapers and all the other stuff that they were doing to you, face diaper this, and go get your line up and go stand there and get your little tranquilizer and all that other stuff. Yeah, when you were too busy focused on that, this took place. But if you go read that executive order, the actual application of it says what? January the 11th, 2021, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Boy, that's pretty specific. Woo, January the 11th, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time is when it went into effect. And immediately after January the 11th, 2021, guess what you witnessed if you were paying attention in the finance world? Jeff Bezos stepped down from Amazon for philanthropy reasons. Oh, yeah, I bet. When I was doing my master's degree at Colorado State University in business, we studied Jeff Bezos because he wanted to overtake the gross domestic product sales of, profits really, not just sales. He wanted to take over the GDP and be the world's leader in GDP over Walmart. So he invested in Whole Foods. He wanted to apply his Amazon logistics to Whole Foods. All right. So he wanted to be the world's leader in GDP. And all of a sudden, this guy who had that big vision is stepping down for quote unquote philanthropy reasons. Bezos, Warren Buffett. You had Warren Buffett dropping stocks and different things of that nature. Bill Gates left and Warren Buffett left the Bill Gates Foundation. Bill Gates and his wife announced divorce. All right. And then you had GameStop and all these different people losing their rear ends. You had GameStop, a typical company you wouldn't see or really care about unless you do know about them. They're having commercials on the Super Bowl that year, trying to save their rear ends. All right, all these different Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune this companies started bellying up. And that was a coincidence? And all these big name people that were all over major Democrat donors were all of a sudden dumping stock. Mark Zuckerberg, for about 7 months, somewhere in there, I think it's 7 months, he dumped 25 million a single day, every day, for 7 months. Then you saw him meet with President Trump after that, not too long after it. People, this is not that difficult. And now the libtards are mad because they saw Zuckerberg, they saw Bill Gates, they've seen Bezos, Tim Cook of Apple with President Trump. And they say, they're traitors and they've turned on us. No, capitulation. They capitulated. Because they may not have been doing anything that was crimes against humanity or something that would have required a death penalty. It could have been something very drastic, sure. But they capitulated. You'll find out that later. So that's why all the patriots out there, you need to take a chill pill. What they're doing right now is a slow roll. And it is painful. I get it. But it's for the normie world out there. The normie world who can't even comprehend something so simple. But it's because of their priorities. Their priorities are in football. Their priorities are in reality TV. Their priorities are in things that just don't matter. Right? At the end of the day. But you got to give it to them the way they want it. And President Trump's told you. You got to give them what they want. And unfortunately, what they want is drama. So you have to do that. So just chill. That's what y'all need to be doing. Taking a chill pill. So that's how Palantir ties into everything. And so, again, the slow roll is due to low IQs. Now, you can strengthen your IQ out there. But only you can do that. It's like I tell people, I can explain it to you, but I can't make you understand it. All right, so it goes back to all the people out there like I'm saying, they're taking so when a guy like me puts this out here, I'm coming straight from Department of War, and then also what I do and who I'm working with. That's all credible. All right, and then also President Trump's laws and orders that he's invoked, the enforcement of those, my military, and then all that combined, and then showing it to you, which is what part 2 is. This is why it's so much bigger, because this is the special operations portion. It's 593 pages, but most of it is special operations. Irregular warfare, unconventional warfare, how to think outside the box. Once you have a solid foundation in our functions, our 3 branches of government, it shows you how to think strategically, but tactically in another form. Once you have a solid foundation, you can think a lot of different things, and that's what strengthens your empowerment skills and your application of it. All right, that's what this is. Part 2 does sum up the inauguration and stuff of 2025, but it's up to date there. But then it gets heavy into special operations, heavy into unconventional warfare, heavy into irregular warfare, heavy into the things that you ask, and you hear people ask. Maybe you're afraid to ask at events and things, but you'll hear people ask, what would this look like, and what would that look like? And this answers a lot of that. All right. Now, you can't put everything in a book because people wouldn't read it. It would be longer than Obamacare, But that is how you strengthen your skills. But what you got to do is also realize that you control what you put in your life. And too many people, because there's so many names and faces out there, and everybody wants to be a name, everybody wants to be a face. Majority of the podcasters out there, they want to be the first to say it. Well, being first, this ain't a race. You hear Ricky Bobby and Talladega Nights or whatever it is, where it's, you ain't first, you're last. It ain't that when it comes to military and operations. Because in military operations, sometimes there's things called retreats and then flanks. All right, so a lot of these podcasters are trying to get lucky with one little thing and make you flood over there because they were correct on one thing. It's not about being correct on one thing. It's about getting it correct for all of us. And so when President Trump's hammering the mainstream media, we don't need to replace it with all these other babbling fools out there who are just trying to get lucky on one thing for a quick buck or a quick fix or whatever it is in their life. All right? We have got to eliminate all that. We have to, but you control that. Because all you got to do is unsubscribe from them, unfollow them, quit watching them. If you comment and share their stuff, that gives them more views. It brings more people to it. You need to have the quality people in your life that empower you, make you think better, think sharper, think quicker, impromptu, improvise, things of that nature. You've got to sharpen that. So you allow what you allow in your life. That's why I'm going to address one example out there. When you hear these podcasters say the deep state are in panic, how are they in panic? When you look at 21 to 25 again, why would quote unquote Joe and the whole DNC, if they were real, why would they expand but also continue all of President Trump's executive orders with national emergencies of election interference, Hong Kong, combating trafficking, all the other things that's going on, Doge, all the orders of ICE, all the orders of the National Guard? Why didn't they terminate anything? It's like literally, it feels like if you could, like if your brain was a piece of ice, right? And you all of a sudden put your brain near a fire and it's melting. That's what it feels like when you're sitting here and you know what I know, and you hear people out there saying the deep state are in panic. And you're going, okay, well, why the deep state continue 8 executive orders with 8 national emergencies that all apply to the military, the National Guard, Joe, the Ho, and the DNC didn't have a single Title 10, Title 14, Title 32, but the border was still going on. The National Guard were operating in cities that people didn't realize what they were doing, but they could have, and a lot of people did see it. So a lot of people questioned, man, I saw this National Guard rolling in on a weekday. What are they doing? The New York National Guard and the subways. You had President Trump at the border in February 2024, which would have been a breach of national security. It could have also been perceived as a seditious act to overthrow the government. that you would have a quote-unquote former president standing at the border with the National Guard deploying weekly and monthly before and after President Trump. He's standing there with the Adjutant General who reports to the governor unless the National Guard are federalized by Title 10. And the only Title 10 order at that place was February the 20th, 2019, and also March 27th, 2020, by President Donald John Trump, both of them. And he's standing there with the governor of Texas. And then when he walks into the forward operating base, the FOB, they do, attention. You don't salute a former president. You don't salute a former commander, period. And then you had April to December 2024, President Trump met with 12 foreign leaders 13 different times at a private location, Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago. That would have been a violation of the Logan Act, which is Title 18, federal crimes. So they're trying to hammer him for being with a hooker 30-something years ago. False accusations and all these other things. Something to do with taxes and this, that, and other. Taxes and a hooker. But they had full-fledged world witnesses. President Trump violating Title 18, Section 953, the Logan Act, of which Joe Biden recommended to Obama to use on General Flynn. And they could have barred President Trump forever from being number 47, but they just let him run scot-free while also continuing all executive orders with national emergencies, while also never terminating a single executive order without a national emergency. And I can keep going. There's a lot more, but those alone are your biggest ones that wouldn't make sense if the quote-unquote deep state are in panic currently. That don't make sense. Why would the deep state dig a gigantic, massive, crazy crater to try to go, help us out? We dug our own hole. Help us. He's a dictator and a Nazi and a king. That is how dumb and a marblehead you would have to be to believe that the deep state is in panic right now, but yet they dug their own crater. It wasn't a hole. It's a crater. And then they're turning around yelling, he did this. It's his fault. He's a dictator. He's a Nazi. He's a king. That's how dumb you have to be to believe that. And you don't need that in your life is what I'm saying. You don't need to be dumb because you ain't got to be dumb because there's already a blueprint strategy that outlines the whole thing. Every bit of what people's watching, like the July 16th speech, are for the slow marbleheads who don't know anything about podcasts like this. Operators like me. It's for those people. It's for your friends and family in the normie land who probably watched wet paint dry today. I'd rather watch wet paint dry than watch soccer. You can try to convince me otherwise, but you won't be able to convince me. All right. So you got people in normie land who just absolutely refuse to believe special operations, laws, and orders of what President Donald John Trump is absolutely invoked, using, in the face of. The 45-47, the dash matters. So why would the deep state do that? So the way patriots and Republicans and conservatives out there think and talk, they'd only arrest the people that they know about. See, and that's the problem we have. This is why you got to empower yourself, read, study, comprehend, apply what President Trump's using and what the military, what we're using, but especially when we invoke a military government. Every one of President Trump's nominations and endorsements, but especially endorsements, it follows the same playbook as President Dwight David Eisenhower did with his contingency plan, following a catastrophic event. Well, the catastrophic event was a biological chemical weapon used in 2020. All right. When you look at all the 2020, the bioweapon of COVID, and then you look and you take all these orders and all these laws and the invoking of the continuity government and the invocation of the reconstitution, when you look at every aspect of it, and then you apply that was a bioweapon, which would be, it was disastrous. People were dying and they're still dying from it. That's disastrous. That would count as catastrophic and disastrous verbiage. If you go look at President Dwight David Eisenhower, who, by the way, veterans, never saw combat, but he was a 5-star general, master strategist. He was a real winner because he didn't start foreign wars for quote-unquote diplomacy, all right, and quote-unquote defense. right? So when all that, President Trump's had to be delicate with this because you have so many military industrial complex veterans out there who want to compare their quote unquote DD-214s and all this other stuff and put down other veterans because they didn't do what you did. All right, has nothing to do with that. Not a thing. This is draining the deep state. This is ridding the deep state and all their tactics that they did and pulled over the people. President Eisenhower had a thing called the contingency plan, but if you go to Google, type in the atomic midwife, you can read all about it, where he said, businessmen, ladies, you're now included this day and age because President Trump is doing businessmen and women. But back then, the ladies weren't in that field as much, so don't take that personal. Obviously, this ain't a DEI bullcrap speech anyway, which is all false. All right. At that time period, it was businessmen and military men that President Eisenhower said had experience and they could lead and not be compromised as long as certain people selected them. President Trump, every one of his endorsements, that's why you people are fools. You're fools when you say you're going to vote for someone else. When you claim to be a President Trump supporter, but you turn around and say you're going to vote for someone else that's the polar opposite of what he endorsed. Every one of his endorsements is following a strategic blueprint plan. And it's the same plan that President Dwight David Eisenhower, 5-star general, master strategist, put into place for after catastrophic events. Businessmen and women, highly successful and or, very key, and or special operations or Navy SEALs and a few regular veterans. But the regular veterans are colonels, former colonels, things of that nature. Highly successful based off of merit. And what is President Trump talking about? We're getting back to a merit-based society where when someone's smarter than you, you'll be able to recognize it. Doesn't mean they're better than you. It doesn't mean you're inferior to them. It means that, hey, this person can walk the walk and talk the talk. Someone like me, who I can remember so much stuff, right? And it's all laws, it's all orders, but it all leads to integrity, tenacity, honesty, loyalty, and all the things put together that makes reciprocality also great. When you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and everybody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's reciprocality. And it works great for every one of us. So you have to use discernment. If you're mad, angry, frustrated, bitter, tired, worn out, exhausted, whatever it is in your life because you're confused or you just don't know who to listen to, you don't know who to believe, and all this other stuff, that's your problem. You have too much in your life. You want to hear a quick answer from someone who may sound better, deliver better, or isn't as passionate as I am. I'm loud sometimes and passionate because I'm trying to get over to you that the blueprint's already out there. July 16th speech to the real patriots, been knowing this. We've been knowing this. And it's not about, we've been knowing it in a degrading or condescending form. It's going, hey, you can know this too. You don't need to look shocked. You don't need to look like, oh my gosh, what have I been? Yeah, what have you been doing is a understatement because you could have already known this. You could have already been applying yourselves. And it matters. I hear people say, why does it matter? It matters because highways. Now, income tax is bullcrap. We all know it. They want to tax our income and turn around and pay the tax out of our income of other taxes. But there are some taxes that we need. We all share highways together. We share certain things in cities and towns and counties and states that are credible, that we can come together on and be like, yes, we need that. No, we don't need that. Yes, we need that. That's when it matters, is when you put things back in our lives that matter at our county level, our state level, and our federal level. When we get back to those things of what matters, what belongs in government, what doesn't belong in government, when we get back to that, then it'll be so condensed down and it'll be so easy, like President Trump said in 2020, the cure cannot be bigger than the problem. Well, when you get back and you can identify the problems, the cures won't be difficult because you will be empowered. You'll be sharpened on your skills, your application, your knowledge of what matters, which are the laws and the orders of what matter to us in our states, because Alabama law and Texas law are going to be different. Minnesota law, Florida law, going to be different. All right. But you'll know what you need where you're living. And then when it comes to federal laws, then that's where we all come together from. What do we need federally? We don't need much. But see, that's what had taken place. The hijacking of the federal government. And they made it so big that people don't know what to believe. And that's why they had to have a special operation. We had to do this. You had to. Someone had to draw a line in the sand and say, well, we got to try. There was going to be a little pandemonium, sure, initially. There was going to be some confusion initially, yes. But right now where we are, there shouldn't be any confusion whatsoever. You have zero excuses to be confused. You need to know who your commander is. You need to know who people working with him are. And then also the laws and the orders of what President Trump's working with. And when you know those simple things, even though there's a lot of them, but when you know that alone, then you'll hear someone like me and you'll know, hey, because everyone that has made these books #1 bestsellers and also the platforms keep growing, everyone who knows my anniversary, 4-year anniversary is coming up in just a few weeks. 4 years of going viral. Now, my family and friends already knew about it. They already knew about me. They already knew about the documents, etc., etc., etc. And timestamps don't lie. But everyone who's been following since August 24, 2022, it's been consistent, time-stamped, and it's always ahead of time because special operations are always ahead. But it's not ahead in the standpoint of, oh, I'm getting lucky. It's because it's all in laws and orders, and because the general public are slow, it's rolling out slow. So it makes you look even more genius when it's already in laws and orders. But if you knew the laws and orders yourself, you'd be the genius too, because you'd be following along. And then someone like me would confirm it for you. Like if you're over there reading, I have people message all the time or email all the time, and they'll say, hey, am I accurate on this thinking here? Well, I've been reading this, this, and this, and this and that. Do you think this is going to happen? I'm like, bingo, you got it. You're locked in, baby. And what does the Department of War keep telling you to do? Lock in. Stay focused. We're in control. Patriots are in control. Well, you can't be over there gloating if you don't know exactly what they're talking about. And you should want to know exactly what they're talking about to be that true patriot. It's all right to vote for President Trump and not know right now. Okay. Yeah, you voted for him. You support him. But shouldn't you want to know exactly what President Trump is the face of and what the military, what we've all been doing, and all the cool, unique positions that have been called back to duty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I think you should, because that's what makes him great. That's what makes this nation great. That's what makes our military great. And that's what makes the American spirit great. So you have the full blueprint. That's the full breakdown. And when you go back, even though I did it backwards, and then I put the other portion on the back side of that, but when you go apply all those together, you'll see that nothing is new. All these people out there talking about their burn bags and all this, they heard President Trump say, oh, you know, we just discovered. No, we didn't just discover that. That's for the people in the painful section they are so far behind. They're laggards. I mean, they're turtle pace slow. It's for them. So you just gotta keep empowering yourself. If it's tough for you, keep reading. Don't get frustrated though. There's a difference in exhausted and frustrated. At the point you get exhausted and your mind just can't put it down. Don't get frustrated at it. But you gotta read, you gotta study, you gotta comprehend. And the reading is what we gotta bring back in this nation. We have to bring back reading. We have to bring back studying, and we have to bring back comprehension, but the passion around it. All right. And so I highly encourage everybody. So the Midnight Rider rides again. It's on Amazon. You can get it on rattletrap1776.com through me if you want them signed. All right. RATTLETRAP1776.com. If you want them signed, I sign them. I sign all of them. And this is part 1, obviously. And I have other books, but I don't have them sitting here. But you'll see those on the site. And then, obviously, I didn't write this one, but I highly encourage you to read this. highly encourage you. This is a great book. There's also another book that you can access on PDF, or if you want to purchase it, Military Law and Precedents, which is also a great read. Those two books alone can set you where you need to be with military. Those two books alone. Now, again, I didn't write them. I don't make money on these. But this is what this is what we use. This is what JAG uses. Military intelligence, military law, heavily uses this. All right. And you'll learn so much about your president and what he can and can't do. All right. Which there ain't much he can't do. But you'll learn what is supported by the Constitution in here that debunks and shows how all these libtards out there, when they use the Constitution as their crutch, yeah, they look dumber than a GPS on a chainsaw. All right, so we're going to sign off here, and I'll see you guys soon. And we'll be going live again a lot more. I had some other stuff pop up, but I'll be going live a lot more than what I have, just because we'll do different things. But I'm about to roll out of here, and I'll see you guys soon.